For as long as I can remember, my life has been a series of quiet, steady moments, the kind that blend into each other, unnoticed at the time, but leave their traces behind. Small victories, familiar faces, and the comforting rhythms of daily life. They were enough to fill the days, keeping me grounded and safe in their ordinariness. At 61, I had learned to embrace the quiet. I had come to see love as something distant, a memory from another life that had faded with time, like a half-forgotten story whose ending had long been lost. My husband, Jack, had passed away 5 years ago, and since then, I had lived alone in the house we once shared, surrounded by his things, a small shrine to the life we built together. My world had shrunk, but I had come to accept it. I found comfort in my work, in my garden, and in evenings spent with a cup of tea and a favorite old film playing softly on the TV. I had built a life around these rituals, and I thought I was content. But then, just a few weeks ago, everything changed. It wasn't the kind of change you can plan for, nor one you expect at this stage of life. It came quietly, like a breeze in the night, only to become a storm I couldn't ignore. Even now, when I think back on that moment, I can still feel the ripple of it. It haunts me in the way something profound will, as if my own life had shifted, ever so slightly, in a direction I had never seen coming. I would tell you not to make the same mistake I did, though I can't say I regret it. I only wish I had been more prepared, more aware of the unexpected ways the past can catch up with you. It was a rainy evening, one of those nights when the world seemed to hold its breath. The streets were slick with water, and the city was muted beneath the gentle patter of the rain. I stayed late at the office, as usual. I was catching up on paperwork, organizing files that had piled up in the rush of daily demands. Charles Matthews, my boss, had already left for a dinner meeting, but before he went, he called to tell me that his son, Max, would be by to give me a ride home. I didn't think much of it at the time. In truth, I almost refused. I've never been one to accept help easily, and Max, well, he was a stranger to me. A young man in his 20s, still building his career. Someone I had only exchanged pleasantries with during company events. I was fine. I was used to being alone, and I certainly didn't want to inconvenience anyone, especially Max. But when I stepped out of the building and into the rain, I saw him. Max's black sedan was parked by the curb, his tall figure standing next to the door, drenched but smiling. His posture relaxed in a way that spoke of someone used to being comfortable in their own skin. The rain fell heavily around him, but there he stood, seemingly unfazed. There was something about the way he smiled, not forced, but genuine, that made it impossible to turn him down. "Hey, Miss Taylor," he said, his voice warm, the words flowing easily from him. "Need a ride?" I hesitated for a moment, but the truth was, I was tired. Tired of the cold, tired of solitude. I wasn't sure if I was tired of my life, but I knew I didn't want to walk home in this rain. So I gave in, offering a small smile. "I'd appreciate it, but you don't have to, Max, really." Max didn't hesitate for a second. "No trouble at all," he said, holding the door open for me. The warmth from the car rushed out to greet me, and as I slid into the passenger seat, I could smell the faint scent of fresh leather and citrus, a clean, almost invigorating scent that seemed to erase the chill of the rain from my bones. He got in and adjusted the mirrors with a practiced hand. I watched him for a moment, how effortlessly he moved, his tall frame bending slightly as he settled into the seat. He didn't seem nervous or uncomfortable, not like I might have expected from someone so young. Instead, there was a quiet confidence in the way he handled everything, from the steering wheel to the subtle turn of the gear shift. We pulled out onto the wet roads, the rain now nothing more than a soft drizzle. The only sound was the swish of the wipers against the windshield, a steady rhythm that filled the silence between us. I glanced over at Max, unsure of what to say. He didn't seem to mind, though. He didn't press for conversation. Instead, he let the silence stretch, allowing me to find my own words, if I had any. The streets blurred outside the window, and I felt a strange comfort in the quiet of the car. There was something soothing about it, about being in the presence of someone who didn't expect anything from me. Someone who didn't need me to be anything other than myself. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing. "I hope I'm not keeping you from anything," I said after a while, breaking the silence. It seemed like the polite thing to do, to offer him an out in case he had other plans. Max smiled again, his gaze briefly flicking to mine before returning to the road. "You're not keeping me from anything. I was just finishing up some work stuff," he said easily, though there was a lightness in his voice that made me think he might not have been as busy as he let on. I nodded, unsure of what else to say. Instead, I let the words hang between us, the car cutting through the rain like a boat gliding on the surface of the water. At that moment, something shifted. Not a dramatic change, but enough to make me feel like the quiet I had built around myself, the one I thought was enough, might not have been all I needed. The warmth of the car, Max's easy presence, the simplicity of it all, made me realize something I hadn't considered in years. Maybe I wasn't as fine with being alone as I had thought. As we turned onto my street, I felt a strange pang of regret. It wasn't about the ride that had been a kindness, a simple gesture of care. No, it was something deeper, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, I had closed myself off from the possibility of connection. Max, in his quiet way, had reminded me that I wasn't too old for the world to surprise me. And for the first time in a long while, I wondered what it might feel like to let something new in, to see the world through eyes that weren't clouded by the past. "Here we are," Max said, his voice pulling me from my thoughts. He stopped the car in front of my house and turned to me with a small smile. "It was nice driving you home." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the car's heater. "Thank you, Max. I appreciate it." And I meant it. As I stepped out of the car and into the night, I paused for a moment, looking back at him. He waved, then drove off into the rain, leaving me standing there in the quiet, with something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. It was the beginning of something. I didn't know what yet, but I would soon find out. And I would never be the same again. The car hummed steadily along the wet streets, the sound of the tires rolling over rain-slick pavement almost hypnotic. But it wasn't the rain or the city lights reflecting in puddles that had my attention. It was him, Max. Every now and then, my eyes would drift over to him, though I quickly turned away when I realized it. It wasn't just his youth, though, that certainly had its pull. His eyes, those bright, eager eyes, sparkled with a curiosity that had long since faded from my own. A curiosity that made me feel like I was seeing the world through a new lens, even if for just a moment. And the way he smiled, without hesitation or reservation, like there was no room in the world for doubt or uncertainty, it made me realize how much I'd forgotten about that kind of joy. But there was something else. Something deeper, an unspoken bond between us that I couldn't quite name. It felt like a quiet hum in the air, something that pulsed just beneath the surface, only acknowledged by the brief, fleeting glances we exchanged. He seemed comfortable, in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, comfortable not just in his body, but in his skin. The ease with which he navigated the world around him, without the weight of regret or hesitations pulling him down, was almost foreign to me now. I could hear the sound of his voice as he spoke, low and easy. "You've worked with my dad for a long time." "Huh?" Max asked, his gaze flicking to me briefly before returning to the road ahead. The rain had begun to fall more lightly, a mist hanging in the air, making everything look softer, more distant. "Almost 20 years, I said, shifting slightly in my seat. "It feels like it's been a lifetime." Max smiled, a small curve of his lips that barely touched his eyes, but there was warmth in it. "Yeah. He talks about you all the time," he said, his tone casual, but I could feel something more under it. "Say you keep everything running smoothly around here." I chuckled, grateful for his compliment but trying to downplay it, keep things light. "Well, someone's got to." But then, the atmosphere in the car shifted. The words between us didn't hang in the air with the same ease anymore. It was as if something had pressed down on the silence, making it heavier, thicker. Max's voice softened, a slight distance creeping in. "He doesn't really know me," he said, almost in a whisper, as if the words were more for himself than for me. I turned my head toward him, trying to read the change in his tone, in his expression. "What do you mean?" I asked, the concern I felt evident in my voice. Max didn't answer immediately. The car slowed as he guided it to the side of the road. The drizzle had turned into a fine mist, and the streets seemed quieter, like the world itself was holding its breath. He parked, but the stillness that followed felt thick, like a pause in the middle of a sentence that hadn't quite been finished. "I'm sorry," Max said, breaking the silence with an apology that felt more like a confession. His words were careful, measured, as though he wasn't entirely sure he should be saying them at all. "I didn't mean to make this weird, but I've been holding something in for a while now, and I didn't expect to say it tonight, but I can't pretend anymore." I couldn't even begin to guess what he was about to say. My mind spun through 100 possibilities. Maybe it was about something personal, something to do with his father, or perhaps something far less important. But then his next words hit me harder than I could have ever prepared for. "I've thought about you for a long time," Max continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know this probably sounds crazy. I mean, you're older and you work with my dad, but I've noticed you at those events. The way you carry yourself, like you're made of something quiet but strong. It's hard to put into words, but I just wanted you to know." I could feel my breath catch in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't say anything at all. The words hung in the air between us, suspended, and I wasn't sure how to react. The car, the rain, even the city outside, they all faded away, leaving just the two of us in this fragile moment. I didn't know if I should respond, or if I even could. My mind raced, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. "I don't expect anything," Max added quickly, almost as if to reassure me. His voice softened further, the weight of his admission now hanging between us like something delicate, something fragile. I just needed you to know that you matter." I hadn't expected any of this, not even in the wildest corners of my mind. And yet, here it was something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Something I hadn't known was missing from my life for so long. It wasn't the words themselves, though they were kind and unexpected, but the way he said them, the way he looked at me. There was no judgment, no hesitation, just an honesty that felt like a breath of fresh air. He wasn't just seeing me as his father's colleague, or an older woman, or any of the labels I'd grown used to carrying. No, Max was seeing me as a person, a whole person who still had value, who still had worth, even if I hadn't allowed myself to believe it for so long. It was the way he looked at me, like he could see through the years of grief, of silence, of loneliness that had built up around my heart. It wasn't that I wanted anything more from him, or that I thought this would lead anywhere. It wasn't about that. It was that in that moment I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. The walls I'd built up since my husband's death, walls I hadn't even known I'd constructed, began to crack. His words were like a quiet bomb, soothing a wound I hadn't realized was still open. In a life that had felt like a string of quiet, unremarkable days, Max had given me something to hold onto, something tender and pure, a glimpse of something I thought had long since been lost. I didn't know, I murmured, the words feeling too small for everything I was feeling. But there was nothing more to say. Not right then. Max didn't press. He just let the silence wrap around us, a comfortable, peaceful kind of silence. And in that stillness, I found something unexpected, a spark of hope, of recognition, a connection. The kind of connection I hadn't realized I'd been longing for. And just like that, the weight I hadn't known I was carrying began to lift. The night Max dropped me off, everything felt different, though I couldn't have put it into words then. The familiar silence between us, that quiet respect in his eyes, and the gentle way he opened the car door for me, all remained unchanged. But something had shifted in me. Standing alone in the foyer of my house, the dim light from the lamp casting soft shadows across the room, I felt like a different person. It wasn't just the night, or even the way he'd said goodbye. It was his words, the simplicity of them, the unguarded sincerity. You still matter. And somehow, those words had managed to slip past the walls I'd built around myself. The walls I thought were unbreakable. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, his voice replayed in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. His words circled inside me, lingering, pushing, and pulling at something I'd long buried. I had spent so many years convincing myself that I didn't need anyone, that the past was something I could lock away in a room deep inside me. But Max had opened that door, and now I couldn't close it again. By morning, the world felt different. I moved through my day as though it were on autopilot. Work was the same, my colleagues were the same, but everything felt new. I could barely look at Charles without feeling a disconnection I couldn't explain. There was this subtle unease that I couldn't shake, a sense that something had changed inside me, even if I wasn't sure what it was yet. And it wasn't like I'd suddenly developed feelings for Max, no. It wasn't that simple. It was more like his presence had shaken something loose in me, something I thought I had let go of a long time ago. I was exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't been in years. I couldn't hide from it, even though I desperately wanted to. A few days later, I got the text from Max. It was brief, just a simple line that made my chest tighten. Hope I didn't make things weird. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I stared at it for a long time, my heart thudding hard against my ribs. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't pushing me. But the honesty, the care in his words, hit me in a place I wasn't prepared for. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Finally, I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly as I wrote, "You didn't. Thank you for trusting me with that. I'm still thinking." The reply came almost immediately. "Take your time. I just wanted you to know." I sat there staring at my phone, the weight of his words sinking in. He hadn't asked for anything more than the space to be seen. No expectations. No pressure. Just honesty. And that honesty, it felt like a balm to wounds I hadn't even known were still open. Later that week, Max offered me another ride. It was casual, just like before, but there was something different about him. Something quieter. He was still Max, with his easy smile and that quiet warmth, but there was a new layer to him now, an understanding. As though we were both navigating something unfamiliar, without speaking about it. We didn't talk much on the drive, the quiet between us no longer uncomfortable but comfortable. Like a new language we were still learning. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was just easy. He parked the car at the office, and I was almost reluctant to get out, as if leaving the car would mean leaving the bubble we'd built together, a bubble I wasn't ready to pop. Before I opened the door, I turned to him. The words had been building up inside me, and now, I couldn't hold them back. "You really meant everything you said that night, didn't you?" Max looked at me, his gaze steady, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I did. I meant every word." His response was simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, unsure of what to say next. My mind was a tangle of thoughts, emotions I hadn't fully processed. That's a lot for me to process. "You're young, Max." I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that." Max didn't flinch. He didn't look away, didn't try to explain himself or backpedal. He just looked at me, his expression calm, patient. "You don't have to do anything," he said softly. "You don't have to change anything. But you're seen, Diane. And you always have been." His words were simple, but they pierced right through me. I could feel the weight of them, the quiet sincerity behind them. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't invisible, that I didn't have to hide, to bury myself under layers of indifference and self-protection. Max had seen me, not as a symbol of something broken or damaged, but simply as I was. And that was both terrifying and liberating at the same time. I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all settling over me. What did it mean to be seen like that? What was I supposed to do with it? I didn't have the answers. I wasn't sure if I ever would. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to carry everything alone. Maybe that was the start of something new. Maybe it was just the beginning of understanding what it meant to truly be seen, to let someone in without fearing they'd disappear when things got too complicated. For now, all I could do was hold on to that feeling. Because in the end, It was a feeling that had been buried inside me for far too long. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to let it surface. The words hung in the air between us, simple yet profound, like a soft whisper that cracked the silence of years I'd spent buried in my own doubts. They pierced me more than I cared to admit. I'm not going anywhere. It wasn't a declaration of love. Not yet. But it was something deeper, something quieter, and infinitely more vulnerable. In that moment, a surge of emotion washed over me, and I realized just how much I had been running from the idea of letting someone in. I was afraid. Afraid of what those words meant, of where they could lead, but most of all, I was terrified of how badly I needed to hear them. I hadn't realized how invisible I had become to the world until that very moment. I'd convinced myself that it was easier to fade into the background, to not need anything or anyone. But Max had a way of seeing me, really seeing me, and that terrified me. For the next few days, I found myself thinking about him more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just the things he said, but the way he said them carefully, without any expectation, without rushing me. It was in the soft pauses between his words, the way he didn't pressure me, didn't demand my time or affection. Max was patient in a way that felt like both a gift and a challenge. Each text, each word, each simple interaction felt like a thread weaving its way back into my life. He didn't push. He didn't try to fill every silence with chatter. He was just there, present, and that was enough. And somehow, it made me feel noticed. Not in the way that I used to notice those fleeting moments of attention that always left me feeling empty, but in a way that felt real. I remember one evening after a long day at work, I walked out of my office building and caught sight of him standing there just as he had before. But this time, something was different. The light of the street lamps caught his face, making him look almost softer, warmer. He wasn't just standing there, he was waiting for me. And when he offered me a ride home, it wasn't the casual offer of convenience it might have seemed at first. No, this time it felt like something more. It felt like an invitation to step into something new, something fragile, yet full of possibility. I didn't know where it could lead, and part of me didn't want to know. I was too scared of what I might find. But at that moment, I realized I was tired of running. As we drove through the city, the streets bathed in the glow of twilight. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. I didn't feel the need to fill the space with words, and neither did he. It was as if we had both come to understand that sometimes just being in the same space with someone was enough. When we finally reached my apartment, he walked me to the door, and for a moment, I almost wished he would leave because I didn't know what to do with the feeling inside me. The feeling that something had shifted, something fragile yet important. Something that was just beginning, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to acknowledge it. But then I invited him in. We sat together on the couch, the soft hum of my apartment surrounding us as the hours passed. We talked about everything and nothing about work, about life, about dreams and disappointments. It wasn't deep conversation, but it felt intimate. Like we were unraveling the layers that had kept us apart for so long, just by being in each other's presence. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Something I hadn't felt in years. A sense of being seen not as an obligation, not as a responsibility, but simply as a person. Not the person I tried to be or the one I had convinced myself I was supposed to be, but the person I had forgotten how to be. Max didn't expect anything from me. He didn't ask me to say the right thing or do the right thing. He just was there. And that was all I needed. Sometimes, love doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it doesn't come with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes, it's just about being seen, about being wanted, even when you've convinced yourself that it's too late for all of that. That night, as we sat in the quiet, I realized something. I didn't need to be afraid of what might come next. I didn't need to be afraid of needing him, or of letting myself be needed in return. Because sometimes, the best kind of love doesn't need to be spoken. It just needs to be felt. And as I sat there with Max, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lights around us. I felt something stirring inside me, something I thought I had lost, something that made me believe, for the first time in a long while, that love could still find me after all.